CUPRA Leon might not be the standalone CUPRA hot hatch model we'd hoped for, but it does offer a very appealing and satisfyingly sophisticated, affordably priced alternative to that fast Volkswagen Golf, Skoda Octavia or Audi A3 Sportback model you might have been considering. As with those cars, this Spanish shopping rocket comes with a choice of conventional petrol turbo or PHEV power plants, and we're promised that there'll be Latin spirit in every one. Let's see.
For about as long as many of us care to remember, a Seat Leon CUPRA was a cheaper way to get into a Golf GTI. OK, you had to put up with an interior that was notably less attractive, but in the way it drove, it was pretty much identical. Same engine, same running gear, same great way it went up the road. You just paid less. These days, the Leon has stepped out from the long shadow cast by the Golf GTI and has got a bit Rafa Nadal on us, all bulging biceps and attitude, creating this, the CUPRA Leon. In theory, this is a hot hatch from a fresh brand, CUPRA being the marque created by Seat in 2018 for its sporty models. In practice, though, this car functions as the flagship variant for the latest Seat Leon range, and it can be had either with faster versions of that car's 2-litre TSI petrol turbo engine or a quicker tuned-up take on the e-hybrid PHEV powertrain that is also familiar to Leon customers. So really it's a Leon CUPRA, not a CUPRA Leon, but that's being pedantic. What's more important is what this car is like, and here we're going to find out. In future, the CUPRA brand will have its own bespoke designs. We've already seen and been impressed by one of these, the mid-sized Formentor SUV, which shares almost everything with this car. But for the time being, this fledgling Iberian marque needs a model that will take its emblematic values to a wider audience. This sporty Leon should do that. After all, 44,000 examples were sold of the previous generation model. But is this CUPRA variant still the king of Leons? Is it better than a Golf GTI or GTE? And would you want to risk buying into an unknown brand if it was? All good questions. Car and Driving's Test, the industry's most detailed and comprehensive, is going to try to answer them. The CUPRA brand might be a relatively new one in this class, but it's actually got more motorsport heritage than most competing makers in the segment. This nameplate was originally formed for faster Seats after the Spanish maker had claimed the fiercely fought 2-litre World Rally Cup in 1996, beating the likes of Renault, Peugeot and Skoda. The British Seat CUPRA Championship for touring cars then began in 2003, the same year the CUPRA name first appeared in the European Touring Car Championship. The Leon CUPRA won the British Touring Car Championship in 2006 and then repeated the feat in 2008, and that was the same year the car also carried off the World Touring Car Championship crown. Other circuit successes followed, and in more recent times we've seen the CUPRA Leon Competizione, ready-to-race track car with 340 PS, which is good for 160 miles an hour and which carries a cool price tag of around £110,000. All of which is worth knowing if your friends question why you've decided on a relatively unknown family hot hatch when you could have had something more conventional in this class like a Honda Civic Type R or a Ford Focus ST, or indeed the GT branded Golf or the VRS branded Skoda Octavia models, which, like this CUPRA Leon, broaden the remit of today's fast hatch to also include the option of plug-in hybrid power. That's actually what we've chosen to try here, the e-hybrid model, which uses an uprated 245 PS version of the 1.4-litre TSI PHEV powertrain you could have in a lesser Seat Leon. The other core CUPRA Leon engine is also one used in lesser form by ordinary Seat Leons, a conventional 2-litre TSI petrol unit offered with this CUPRA in three forms, with 245 PS at the foot of the range, with 300 PS in the TSI 300 version of the car that the media tends to talk most about, and wedded to four-wheel drive in the 310 PS form, which also features in CUPRA's larger Formentor SUV. So instead of a single super focused Leon CUPRA model, what we're now presented with is a range of CUPRA Leons with varying degrees of performance focus. So much more opportunity for this Iberian contender to trip itself up with its own pretended cleverness. It does help, though, that the fundamentals here are so right. That's something that we remarked on when we first tested this 4th generation Leon model back in 2020. Then we talked about the extra dash of spirit that's evident in this Leon, which for some reason you just don't feel in an apparently identical Volkswagen Group hatch. This is proper sportiness, complementing the agile, eager feel that's always epitomised Leon motoring in its pokier guises. In our test of the conventional Leon, we tried and we really liked the sportier FR spec version, which gets firmer suspension, wider tyres and a 15mm lower ride height. Well, all CUPRA Leons sit closer still to the deck, 25mm lower at the front and 20mm lower at the rear than a base spec version of the ordinary Seat model. Plus, the engineers behind this fledgling Iberian brand have worked further on the settings for the multi-link rear suspension setup, and they've added an extra CUPRA Red Mist driving mode. It all sounds quite promising. Choosing this plug-in hybrid variant with its 34-mile all-electric driving range is obviously not the best way to experience the effect that all those changes might make in terms of performance and dynamic handling. It does, after all, carry around considerably more weight than its conventional showroom stablemates. I think 186 kilos in extra bulk for this e-hybrid version over the comparable 245 PS 2-litre TSI model, which of course you feel the first time you throw this car into a corner at speed. There is still some fun to be had here, though, for sure. A little more than the mechanically almost identical Golf GTE, thanks to the direct, engaging steering feel that's long characterised all kinds of Leon models. The standard inclusion of DCC, dynamic chassis control, also helps to mask all that extra weight a bit. It's a system that can be almost infinitely fiddled with via the drive mode menu's individual section. There's a slider control which allows you to select no more than 15 damper settings. That changes not only the shock absorbers but also chassis controller settings too. Ah yes, the driver profile modes. Well, they're not only to deal with suspension but throttle and steering feel. We mentioned the extra CUPRA one, which activates quite an engaging, artificially created engine soundtrack that's piped into the cabin via the stereo speakers. The alternative sport and comfort settings are better, more fluid and linear ones for day-to-day driving though, if you can be bothered to select them, that is. The fastest 300 and 310 PS CUPRA Leons get an alpha-like hanging drive mode button from the left-hand steering wheel spoke, but you have to do without that lower down the range. And that forces you to fish around for your chosen drive settings in the complicated menus of this centre stacked screen, which on the move could be rather dangerous, particularly as even this rather sensibly orientated CUPRA Leon is really rather quick. With 400 Newton meters of torque on tap, 62 from rest is dispatched in just 6.7 seconds on the way to 140 miles an hour. For the alternative CUPRA Leon model with a 245 PS output, the conventional base 2-litre TSI 245 version, the respective sprint figure is 6.4 seconds on the way to the artificially limited 155 miles an hour top speed that's common to all variants using this 1984cc engine. Not bad stats then for a pair of entry-level models, which alerts you to the fact that the quicker TSI 300 high-performance derivative is likely to be very quick indeed, and so it proves. That car slashes the rest to 62 sprint time to just 5.7 seconds, and it's 4.9 seconds with the TSI 310 Estate flagship model, which has the advantage of the four-wheel drive system, which unfortunately can't be had elsewhere in the range. It'll be the TSI 300 front-driven version that most will focus on though, a model which borrows its engine directly from a Volkswagen Golf GTI Club Sport. That hot Golf is 29 kilos lighter, which probably helps its slightly more fluid quality of ride, but we'd trade that for the alternative CUPRA Leon's standard adaptive damping system. That's a feature which would be an expensive option on the pricier VW. In TSI 300 form, the CUPRA Leon also feels a touch better tuned. The snap you get from the 7 ratios of the DSG paddle shift auto gearbox, for example, and the impressively unintrusive intervention of the VAQ limited slip differential, which through the turns kills almost any trace of torque steer and allows the grippy Bridgestone rubber to almost always incorruptibly get enough traction down to the bitumen to fire you from bend to bend. This car really does just grip and go. A Ford Focus ST might ultimately be a fraction more rewarding on your favourite back road, and a Honda Civic Type R might, in the final analysis, be a slightly better track car. But if you're looking for a car in this segment which is able to combine the best elements of both of those two class leaders, then we think that this might well be the one. Which makes it a pretty good right first time attempt from a new brand which actually isn't all that new, and a new model which actually turns out to be rather familiar. In pursuit of some extra efficiency, you can dull it down a bit with PHEV tech, as is the case with this test car, but there's still a bit of Latin spirit left to entertain and make this family hot hatch, which if we were searching in this segment, we'd find very difficult to ignore. It's quite clear that this is a more purposeful breed of Leon, although the aesthetic changes made over the standard model aren't actually that far-reaching. This would-be Alfa Romeo was penned under the oversight of Alejandro Mezzonaro Romanos, who ironically is now head of design for Alfa Romeo, someone who clearly understands the importance of defining detail in brand DNA, evident here whether you opt for this 5-door hatch or the alternative estate. All the core things here at the front are pretty much standard Leon, the long creased bonnet and the trapezoidal grille with its flanking LED headlights, but everything seems more dynamic and different. That grille has a dark chrome frame and it's embellished by a bold CUPRA logo, and the required overtaking presence, well, that's delivered by larger air intakes and a large front splitter. Move in profile and you might spot that this car sits 25mm lower at the front and 20mm lower at the rear than an ordinary Seat Leon, but you're more likely to spot visual changes like these darker finished door mirrors. More powerful models also have extended lower side sills to visually lower the car. Plus, across the range, there are far larger wheels than you get on most regular Leons. Nearly all CUPRA variants feature these big 19-inch rims, which house the copper-coloured Brembo brakes. And there is the alternative of a unique matte paint option with the kind of metallic complexity that you usually find on a supercar. The rear makes its own statement too, with 2 copper-coloured dual exhausts embedded on each side of this unique diffuser, which along with this more overt roof spoiler is one of the things that makes this CUPRA Leon's aerodynamics 8% better than the previous generation model. This coast-to-coast style full-width LED taillight treatment provides the finishing touch. As usual though, what's more important is what you can't see, the supremely flexible MQB modular transverse matrix chassis, which was introduced with this model's predecessor and which has underpinned countless VW Group models since the Mark 7 model Golf first introduced it back in 2012. In this form it now features added rigidity and a stiffer hot-formed steel and aluminium structure. So this CUPRA has much more of its own identity, but will that carry forward into the cabin? CUPRA puddle lights give the car a more unique feel at night when you get in. But it's all pretty standard Leon fare once you take a seat inside, although the brand has done its best to add a few differentiating touches. You're treated to sports bucket seats, a leather-stitched CUPRA steering wheel and silver CUPRA sports pedals. And the copper-coloured theme continues, most notably with this trimming around the prominent air vents here, but also with the stitching that you get on the seats and also on the wheel. More powerful CUPRA Leons get little Alfa-style buttons hanging off the steering wheel spokes for drive modes and for engine ignition. And there are bespoke CUPRA graphic options in the digital instrument cluster. This more unique model also gets a smart interior wraparound lighting feature found on pricier Leons, which gives the cabin an unbroken arc of light wrapped around the entire width of the dashboard. It continues on into the doors too, and it glows different colours to alert you to different features, blind spot detection for example. We just mentioned the instrument cluster. This digital driver binnacle display is part of the digital cockpit arrangement that features on all 4th generation Leon models, and it pairs this digital instrument screen with a 10-inch Center Stack Media System Plus with navigation monitor. For the CUPRA brand, the digital driver binnacle display here gets, in addition to its range of selectable view layout options, an extra single dial sports screen which provides the driver with a more focused display of information which covers things like RPM, current power and torque delivery, turbo pressure and the longitudinal and lateral G-force accelerometer. A touch of this steering wheel spoke view button allows you to scroll through the binnacle's other more usual layout options, twin virtual dials with a central information section, or a more open screen with the digital speed readout below. This alternative layout features Seat's usual diagonally split design theme. Either way, you can highlight the left, the right or the center of the screen using this steering wheel button and tailor what you want to see in each area using the little rotary controller nearby. This right hand side can display compass, route guidance, G-force or audio info, while on the left you can select from range, MPG, fuel level, temperatures, average speed, trip data and drive assist info. On this plug-in model there's a battery readout too. The center part of this monitor can show features more graphically, or a nav map can be selected, and that can also display full screen. When you power off, usefully the screen reverts to a trip summary, and that gives you driving time and distance travelled, or also consumption and average speed. Anything this instrument screen can't tell you, and much that it can, will be covered off by that 10-inch Center Stack Media System Plus with navigation monitor that we mentioned earlier on. Functions and menus for which replace many of the buttons which littered the front of the cabin in the previous generation model of this car. Too many in our view. We're going to get to that in a moment. It's whispered that directors at CUPRA's parent brand Seat aren't particularly happy at having the whole digital cockpit setup imposed on them by VW Group HQ in Wolfsburg, and it's certainly true that this center stack monitor here in particular has rather too much to do. Some elements of its colourful layout really work, things like the smart graphics, the nice haptic clicks when you press screen options and so on, and some really don't, like the awkward slider controls for volume and for temperature beneath the central display. Still, you can activate those features in other ways, and you could always argue that pushing cabin design boundaries doesn't come without a degree of risk. For this center stack monitor, there's a choice of two home screen starting points. This one uses the diagonal graphic we referenced earlier. This is supposedly inspired by the Diagonal Avenue street layout in Barcelona, and it prioritizes the three functions that you most commonly use: navigation, audio and phone, for example. Alternatively, you can switch to a home screen with the little icons which can be held and then dragged and dropped about, much as you would on a smartphone. Pretty much all the infotainment stuff that you could need is here. Things like navigation, radio, telephone, vehicle data, and the smartphone mirroring Apple CarPlay and Android Auto features of the Spanish maker's full link connectivity system. There's also a built-in eSIM which enables you to create a Wi-Fi hotspot and to enjoy online connectivity, and that allows you to receive traffic information, access online radio and benefit from over-the-air system updates. And there's also an online shop which will allow you to upgrade certain elements of this car's technology after you've bought it. That uses an over-the-air update system which will allow the brand to potentially improve the screen's functionality over time too. We weren't quite so pleased to find this Media System Plus monitor is also burdened with the task of climate control. Once you locate the ventilation screen options, they work fine, unlike the temperature slider controls. And there's a particularly neat layout which gives you shortcut options for frequent climate needs: warm my hands, cool my feet, defog the windows, warm my feet and fresh air. Plus there's an air care climber section which allows you to select the option to filter fine dust and pollen out of the air inside the vehicle. But you have to take your eyes off the road for far too long to find all this, even if you do use the provided shortcut options at the top of the display. In an Audi A3, which has fundamentally the same cabin architecture, you get a row of separate physical climate controls beneath these central vents, and this Leon would benefit from that too. It does at least help in this regard, though, that climate is one of the many things that you can control via the voice control system, and that's activated by prefacing what you want with "Hola, hola," which you might find a little self-conscious saying in front of your passengers here. Clever digital microphones are able to ensure clear voice recognition and also to locate the person who's speaking, either the driver or the front passenger. So if the front passenger asks for the heated seat to be switched on, for example, the system will recognise the identity of that questioner and only activate the front passenger's heated seat. It's very neat. Enough with screens and digitalisation though. When we mentioned the ignition and drive mode buttons hanging from the steering wheel earlier on, you might have noticed that this test car, the e-hybrid variant, doesn't have those. Now unfortunately those Alpha style hanging buttons only feature on the top 300 and 310 PS high performance variants, at which point the function of this circular button here ahead of the stubby silver auto gear change toggle switch in the middle of the lower console changes from that of ignition to stability control. Losing that simple activation of the drive modes creates a bit of an issue with lesser CUPRA Leons like this one. The only other way of finding and activating those modes is to search through menus on the centre stack screen, which is so infuriating. It's time consuming too, and it's potentially dangerous in terms of the time that your eyes need to leave the road ahead. Most of the time you'll end up probably not bothering with them. Other potential irritations include the pointed clack sound that accompanies central screen feature selection and activation of this small touch-sensitive switch panel for the lights that's buried down here just above your right knee. We'd have preferred to see a physical dial for the audio volume on the main screen too. As it is, if you don't use the steering wheel control, that's not always possible when you're twirling the tiller. You're stuck with this fiddly central volume slider beneath the infotainment screen. Given the asking prices here, it's also disappointing that on most models these sporty seats do without adjustable lumbar support. And there are a few signs of how should we put it, cost management, yes. The rather low rent door pulls and the absence of the flock-lined door bin bases that you get in a Golf to stop your keys from sliding about, for example. Still, for every irritating foible, there are 2 or 3 other features that you'll probably really like. Maybe the central armrest here that tops the bin between the seats and adjusts for 5 stages of height. The way that in the background lighting part of the centre screen's car section, you can set the brightness for different parts of the front of the cabin, the mid fascia, the footwell and the door cards. Or perhaps just the way that the pedals align perfectly with the steering wheel. Earlier we mentioned the stubby Porsche-style shift-by-wire lever for the DSG Auto, which is mandatory with all CUPRA Leons and works almost like an electric switch, and it frees up space on the centre console for extra stowage. On the subject of storage, there's a big glove box and there are decently sized door bins too, with angled interior sections which can hold a 500ml bottle of water. Plus you get that lidded bin between the seats that we just mentioned. This incorporates a 12-volt socket. There's also a ticket clip in the driver's sun visor, and there's the usual twin cup holders below the gear lever. You'll find more connectivity points, twin USB ports, above this large open area at the base of the centre stack, although unfortunately these sockets are both of the smaller USB-C type, so depending on your device you might need this unsightly converter lead. Seat has forgotten an overhead sunglasses compartment too. What else? Well, build quality from the Barcelona factory seems strong, and the slim A-pillars mean good frontward vision, but over-the-shoulder vision isn't quite as good. The large C-pillars rather get in the way, so it's just as well that rear parking sensors and the rear view camera are both standard fit. Okay, let's take a seat in the back. The CUPRA Leon is a slightly longer car than its Golf GTI cousin, and that, along with this KL series model's 50mm wheelbase increase, leads you to hope for a touch more rear legroom, which by and large is what you get, an extra 49mm of rear seat legroom compared to the previous 5F series third generation Leon Cupra, meaning that a pair of 6-foot adults could be accommodated here in some reasonable comfort, providing front seat occupants don't slide their seats fully back. It is a bit roomier here than in a Ford Focus ST, but not quite as accommodating as a Honda Civic Type R. And in a comparable Skoda Octavia VRS, you'd have loads more room. As we said with the previous generation model, we're disappointed that the height of this central transmission tunnel here makes it so difficult for middle seat occupants to be comfortably accommodated. 2 people here would be quite happy though, and they'll also benefit from this fold down central armrest with its twin cup holders, and from 3-zone climate control, which gives you these separate controls for these twin central vents. Seat back pockets are provided, and the copper stitched door cards with their angular handles incorporate decently sized bins. There are twin central USB ports. A premium feel is delivered by these twin beamed overhead reading lights. There are also more coat hooks than you could possibly need on the B pillar and in the overhead grab handles on both sides. We're not quite so keen on these part leather floor mats, which mark easily and will quickly get really scruffy throughout a typical British winter. It is good though that a bit of extra light illuminates what would otherwise be rather a dark space in here via these small rear quarter-light windows. Let's finish this segment by taking a look in the boot, the catch for which is activated by pushing this centre tailgate badge. Your salesperson may well be keen to reference the fact that the CUPRA Leon's usual 380 litre trunk space capacity, exactly as that of a Golf GTI, is around 40 litres more than you get on a rival Ford Focus ST, enough for up to 6 carry-on cases. They're less likely to point out, though, that this Leon's capacity is still significantly down on what you'd find in segment rivals like Skoda's Octavia VRS and Honda's Civic Type R. And they might also neglect to mention that if you happen to choose this CUPRA Leon e-hybrid PHEV model, cargo capacity falls massively to just 270 litres. At least once you get beyond this rather high loading lip, you'll find the space on offer to be pretty usable, and a pushchair or a baby buggy would easily fit, or even a set of golf clubs spread widthwise if you make full use of these corner recesses. Disappointingly though, you can't have the adjustable height boot floor, which is standard on a Golf, even as an option, although it can be had with the alternative estate. Still, this is a pretty flexible area thanks to twin bag hooks, 4 tie-down points and a ski hatch in the centre of the seat back, so longer items can be slid forward between a couple of rear-seated passengers. On a conventionally engined model, there's a bit more space under the cargo base, although you don't get that with this PHEV because the battery pack lives under the boot floor. Either way, CUPRA neglects to include any sort of space-saver spare wheel as standard. Pushing forward, the conventional 60-40 split rear bench frees up 1,470 litres across a load area that'll be virtually flat if you have the boot floor in its upper position. It's 1,210 litres with this e-hybrid variant. If you do need lots of regular cargo versatility, you'll obviously be better off choosing the CUPRA Leon Estate body style. That offers a 620 litre boot or 470 litres with the e-hybrid, which on the conventional model is extendable to 1,470 litres with the seats folded. So if you're interested in a CUPRA Leon, here are the main showroom facts that you need to know. Pricing from launch was pitched primarily in the £32,000 to £40,000 bracket, and 3 trim levels are on offer. Base VZ1, this mid-range VZ2 and top VZ3, with only the 2 top options available if you choose to pay the extra premium of just under £1,100 that CUPRA wants for the estate body shape. That's your alternative to this 5-door hatch. The figures being asked here are significantly below the prices CUPRA wants for its identically engineered Formentor SUV. Think in terms of a like-for-like saving of around £5,000. And that VZ moniker, by the way, is based on the Spanish word veloz, meaning speed or fast. Anyway, in the CUPRA Leon range, 3 engines are available. They're all petrol-powered and they're all mated non-negotiably to 7-speed DSG auto transmission. For the mainstream variants, there's a 2-way choice. Now you either get a conventional 2-litre TSI unit with 245 PS, like you get in the Golf GTI. That's your only option with the base VZ1 trimmed hatch variant. Or for a premium of around £2,000 with the 2 pricier specs, you could choose instead the e-hybrid plug-in variant that we've been trying here. Now that also produces 245 PS, although by very different means, with a 1.4 litre TSI unit mated to an electric motor that's powered by a 12.8 kilowatt hour battery, like you get in the Golf GTE. If you're wanting the full fat Iberian hot hatch experience being promised here though, you'll want to bypass both those 2 alternatives and go straight to the variant that'll mostly be featured in the magazine test you might have seen. That's the one powered by the conventional 2-litre TSI engine in its 300 PS state of tune, like you get in a Golf GTI Club Sport. You can only have that unit with the hatch body shape because the alternative estate variant gets it in a slightly different form with 310 PS mated to CUPRA's 4-drive all-wheel drive system. So yes, pretty close to the combination you'll get in a Golf R. Right, time for some perspective, starting with the premium required to get yourself all this CUPRA tinsel over an ordinary Leon, which is difficult to judge because this CUPRA doesn't directly share any of its engines with an ordinary Leon. The 2-litre TSI engine is used by the Leon in detuned 190 PS form, and to give you some perspective, a Leon FR Sport 2-litre TSI 190 PS would save you about £1,500 over a CUPRA Leon 2-litre TSI 245 PS VZ1 model, which seems a reasonable increment to us for what you get. The e-hybrid engine is available to Leon customers in detuned 204 PS form. At the time of this test, a Leon FR Sport e-hybrid 204 PS model would save you only £700 or so over this CUPRA Leon e-hybrid 245 PS VZ2 variant. What about rivals from other brands? Well, throughout this section so far, we've referenced sporty Golf alternatives. If you want a family hot hatch, well, a base CUPRA Leon 2-litre TSI 245 PS VZ1 would save you more than £3,000 over an alternative identically engineered Golf GTI. If you want a quick PHEV, well, this CUPRA Leon e-hybrid 245 PS VZ2 model would save you around £1,500 over an identically engineered Golf GTE. If you want a faster hot hatch, a CUPRA Leon 2-litre TSI 300 PS VZ2 would save you around £2,500 over an identically engineered Golf GTI Club Sport. And if you want a really quick and grippy shopping rocket, a CUPRA Leon Estate 2-litre TSI 310 PS 4-drive VZ2 would save you about £1,000 over an almost identically engineered Golf R hatch. By the way, if you're going to choose the Golf in either GTE, GTI Club Sport or Golf R forms, you'd also have to budget another £800 for the DCC adaptive damping system, which is standard on this CUPRA. Predictably, you could get much closer to this CUPRA's pricing if you were going to order all the same engineering in a sporty Skoda Octavia. An Octavia VRS with the 2-litre TSI 245 PS engine costs basically the same as a directly comparable CUPRA Leon 2-litre TSI 245 PS VZ2 hatch. You'll pay around £1,500 more for an Octavia VRS plug-in though than is required for this CUPRA Leon e-hybrid 245 PS VZ2 model. For an identically engineered Audi A3 Sportback, you will equally predictably pay a bit more than is necessary for the comparable versions of this CUPRA. An S3 Sportback costs around £1,800 more than an equivalent CUPRA Leon 2-litre TSI 300 PS VZ2. And an A3 45 TFSI E 245 PS model also requires around about £1,800 more if you compare against this identically engineered CUPRA Leon E Hybrid 245 PS VZ2 variant. What about rivals from outside the VW group of brands? Well, 265 PS BMW 128 Ti, 280 PS Ford Focus ST, or a 300 PS Renault Megane RS, or a Honda Civic Type R Sportline would all save you around £2,000 over a 300 PS CUPRA Leon. But if you were to equip any of those cars to the CUPRA standard, much of that advantage would be eroded. You would need fractionally more than is required for a 300 PS CUPRA Leon if you were going to instead choose either of the two other comparably performing rivals. I'm talking about Hyundai's i30N Fastback DCT or the Mercedes-AMG A35. Finding alternatives to this CUPRA Leon e-hybrid plug-in variant outside the VW group of brands is a lot more difficult. Virtually all of the non-SUV, PHEV, family hatch-sized alternatives you could name, say a Mercedes A250e or a Mini Countryman Cooper SE All 4, for example, offer significantly less power, and non-SUV alternatives that can offer similar performance, say a BMW 330e, cost a lot more, think from around £40,000 for a 330e. Enough, we've crunched the figures and specs on this Iberian model's value proposition, so you don't have to. If, having considered all that, you conclude, as we have, that there's nothing quite like a CUPRA Leon in this segment, then you'll be interested to know just how generous this Spanish maker has been when it comes to standard spec. So let's take a look at that now. Even with base VZ1 trim, customers get quite a lot. 18-inch machined sport black and silver alloy wheels, LED headlights with dynamic range control, front fog lamps with a cornering function, tinted rear windows, power folding mirrors, auto headlamps and wipers, keyless entry, rear parking sensors and an anti-theft alarm. Driving aids include a speed limiter for highways and urban areas, an electronic locking differential with dynamic traction support for fast, tight cornering, a driving profile driving mode system with comfort, sport, CUPRA and individual modes, and a whole range of active camera features, which we'll get to in a few moments. What else? Well, inside with base VZ1 trim, there's a 10.25-inch digital driver's binnacle, copper-stitched sport bucket seats, a leather-stitched CUPRA multifunction flat-bottomed steering wheel, a 3-zone climate control, an auto-dimming rear-view mirror, and a wireless smartphone charger. There's also a rear-view camera, cruise control with a speed limiter, CUPRA Sports pedals, and a multicolour ambient lighting system with interior wraparound strips. Media features are taken care of by a 10-inch Media System Plus screen with voice recognition that, as well as 3D mapping, incorporates online infotainment with an embedded eSIM, which means the car will never lose its connection with the digital world and allows users access to the latest infotainment apps and over-the-air updates. This setup only lasts for 12 months, though, before you have to pay an annual subscription for it. Online infotainment also uses cloud-based real-time traffic information to embellish the navigation system. Plus, it can also brief you on parking spaces, speed cameras and fuel stations along your route. And it can allow you to access online radio, so you can listen to stations from all around the world. That's in addition to all the usual infotainment features like a 7-speaker DAB audio system, Bluetooth, vehicle data, and a full link connectivity system for wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring. As with SEAT models, there's also remote access, although again only for the first year of ownership, after which a subscription is payable. This allows you to use a CUPRA Connect app to remotely lock or unlock your CUPRA Leon from wherever you are. If you've forgotten where you parked it, it'll give you an area notification, and if, having got that, you still can't find your car in a crowded car park, then the Connect app will allow you to remotely activate either the alarm, the headlights or the horn. It'll also give you a vehicle health report, it'll help you to schedule servicing, and it'll give you various elements of extra driving data. Plus, the app can also tell you if someone using your CUPRA is driving it faster than a preset speed, and it can alert you if the car's ever stolen. The app also has various online features. You can use it for traffic information, route calculation, and info on local parking services and fuel stations. With this PHEV plug-in hybrid variant, the app will allow you to remotely manage battery charging and climate preconditioning too. The vast majority of CUPRA Leon customers, though, will be looking further up the range. You don't get too much more with the mid-range VZ2 trim level we're trying here. The extra cash buys you larger 19-inch wheels, speed-sensitive steering, and most significantly, DCC adaptive damping, which really completes the functionality of those drive modes we mentioned earlier on. Plus, there's a sportier, flat-bottomed Super Sports CUPRA steering wheel trimmed in perforated leather. The estate version gains roof rails too. If you want leather upholstery as well, you'll need to stretch the top VZ3 spec, which also throws in heating and lumbar adjustment for the front seats. The estate VZ3 gains a powered tailgate with virtual pedal functionality, which allows its opening with the swipe of your foot. Enough with standard spec. What about the options available across the CUPRA Leon range? Well, there aren't too many. The brand prefers to see customers wanting extra features to merely move up a trim level. The main thing your dealer will want you to look at is adding the brand's panoramic glass sunroof, although that costs nearly £1,000 more. You can add in a tow bar too. Otherwise, unless you count the no-cost option of swapping the colour of the Napa leather bucket seats on the VZ3 model to petrol blue, there's nothing else to add. Providing, that is, you've taken account of the fact that you'll almost certainly be paying your CUPRA dealer more for your choice of exterior paint. The only standard colour is solid white, and that doesn't really do this car any favours, so you're more likely to want one of the other options. There are 5 metallic shades and 3 pricier premium metallic colours. This test car's graphene grey is one of those. Now, if you can afford to blow nearly £1,300 for your choice of paint colour, CUPRA will offer you its signature matte finishes, either magnetic tech grey or petrol blue. The latter shade was developed by Seat for the old Leon CUPRA R back in 2017, before the brand decided that that finish was too vulnerable and expensive to respray. Here, CUPRA has gone ahead and offered it anyway, although with a set of very complicated washing instructions. Enough with options, let's finish with a look at driver assist systems and safety provision, features which are of course the same as those you'd find on all other comparable VW Group models. There is autonomous braking, of course. CUPRA's system is called forward collision warning with automatic braking, and as usual with these kinds of setups, it scans the road ahead as you drive. If a potential collision hazard is detected, then you'll be warned. If you don't respond, or perhaps you aren't able to, then the brakes will automatically be applied to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. Every CUPRA Leon also gets a driver alert system which continually monitors your driving reactions for drowsiness and will, if necessary, prompt you to stop for a restorative coffee. Also standard is a lane assist system that warns you when you stray out of lane and applies gentle steering assistance to ease you back into it. Now, in our experience, the lane assist can be a bit intrusive, helping when it's not required and resetting itself on every trip, so that if you don't like it, you have to keep turning the thing off. Anyway, all that is in addition to all the more usual features which come fitted across the CUPRA Leon range and which have helped to justify this car's 5-star Euro NCAP safety test showing. There are twin front, side and curtain airbags, although disappointingly you don't also get an extra one to protect the driver's knees. There are of course ISOFIX child seat fastenings on the rear bench. We also like the inclusion of a multi-collision brake system which recognises when an impact's occurred and brakes the car to prevent it being uncontrollably propelled into oncoming traffic. It's also worth mentioning that this CUPRA Leon's built-in eSIM is used to deliver an eCall SOS system that, in the event of an accident where the airbags have been triggered, it'll automatically alert the rescue services with your exact GPS location. Other conventional safety features include ASR traction control and an ESC stability control system with a sport option for the reduced intervention you might want on a track day. Plus MSR engine braking control, and that'll stop you skidding if you change down abruptly on a slippery surface. If you do get into a skid, a DSR steering assistance feature will help you to steer out of it. And you get an ABS braking system further assisted by brake control, which works via the ESC stability system and a brake booster and helps to reduce stopping time when you really slam on all the anchors in an emergency, at which point, incidentally, the hazard lights will automatically flash. Plus, all CUPRA Leons get a hill hold function, which stops you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions, in addition to tyre pressure monitoring. For more sophisticated camera safety features, you'll have to pay extra for one of the optional safety and driving packs, unless you choose a top 310 PS 4-drive model, which gets everything as standard. Virtually all CUPRA Leon customers will want to spend at least a couple of £100 more on the base M version of this pack. Now, this will give you dynamic road sign display and also high beam assist, plus a feature that you get as standard on the Golf, the VW Group's clever predictive adaptive cruise control system. Now, this system uses GPS data feeds, which are delivered from the navigation system, and inputs from both the car's standard dynamic road sign display setup and also the front-mounted camera to proactively amend the car's cruise speed depending on the layout ahead, bends, roundabouts, junctions, changes in speed limits and built-up areas. This reduces the requirement for driver input and mitigates against sudden speed changes and manoeuvres. Pay a bit more and you can upgrade your safety and driving pack to mid-level L status, in which form side assist, a blind spot monitor will be added in. Plus, on the hatch, you'll also get exit assist, which alerts you of oncoming traffic when you're just about to open one of the doors. The top XL spec safety and driving pack, that will add £800 to your CUPRA Leon's asking price, but it does include the full suite of the brand's camera safety tech. As well as all the features so far mentioned, this will also include two further ones. There's lane change assist, and that helps with quick lane changes. And there's an emergency assist system too. Now here, if the vehicle senses that the driver has taken his or her hands off the wheel for more than 15 seconds, as might happen if, for example, you were taken ill, then audible and visual warnings will be given before a braking jolt. If the driver continues to fail to respond, then the car will be brought to a controlled stop. It's all very reassuring. As we said when testing CUPRA's Formentor SUV, one of the nice things about developing a performance model of any kind from a clean sheet using a Volkswagen Group platform and engineering is that you don't really have to worry very much about efficiency. You just get on and concentrate on the engaging bits. All of this is providing that you get all the very latest engine technology and providing that the final package doesn't weigh too much. Well, this CUPRA Leon doesn't quite get all of the Wolfsburg conglomerate's latest tech. Mild hybrid electrification is missing, and its curb weight, that is a touch heavier than that of a comparable Golf, with the result that it does burn through fuel at a fractionally higher rate, but not by enough for the downside to be really significant. CUPRA Leon customers who really care about matters of efficiency might not be planning to use any fuel at all, and not for commuting duties anyway. The Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders tells us that 94% of UK journeys are of less than 24 miles, and on that basis the PHEV plug-in e-hybrid version of this model that we're trying here offers the possibility of making trips to your local filling station a very rare occurrence indeed. There's only one plug-in powertrain option. The Formentor offers two, but it is the one that most CUPRA Leon folk would want were they be minded to have a PHEV variant. It's the 245 PS unit you'd find in a Golf GTE. Here it offers a WLTP-rated all-electric driving range of up to 34 miles, although a more realistic real-world figure would probably be in the early to mid-20s. As we said in our driving experience section, this comes courtesy of the usual VW Group plug-in technology, which means a 1.4 litre TSI petrol engine mated to a 6-speed DSG auto gearbox and an 85 kilowatt electric motor powered by a 13 kilowatt hour lithium-ion battery. There is a selectable battery section in the centre screen that gives you hybrid and e-mode drive options. The latter focuses the powertrain on all-electric drive. And there is also a selectable battery readout on the left-hand side of the instrument cluster screen. Of course, in deciding the budgetary case for a CUPRA Leon e-hybrid, you will of course need to factor in charging costs, but if you get your charging regime right on off-peak electricity, which will hopefully cost pennies rather than pounds to consume, then those bills shouldn't be too great. The combined range of the petrol and electric motors is around 660 miles, which makes a plug-in CUPRA Leon an ideal, comfortable car for the really long journeys that would probably defeat its full electric CUPRA showroom stablemate, the Born EV. And the plug-in hybrid version of this CUPRA will charge much quicker than a full EV. Powering a PHEV CUPRA Leon from a domestic socket would take around 5 hours, but using a garage wall box, you can reduce that charging time period to around 3.5 hours. Do bear in mind that only a single Mode 3 charging cable is included as standard though. The quoted WLTP combined cycle fuel return for a CUPRA Leon e-hybrid hatch is up to 217.3 miles per gallon. For the estate e-hybrid variant, it's up to 201.8 mpg, and the CO2 reading that'll see your BIK tax payments rated at just 11% is an impressive best of 30 grams per kilometre. It's a best of 31 grams per kilometre for the estate. These are pie-in-the-sky figures, of course, even if you establish a regular charging regime. If you don't, and you accept the invitation to drive this car as it was intended to be driven, then you'll be burning plenty of fuel, and you'll possibly be getting through quite a few sets of front tyres too. A diesel Seat Leon model might rival an e-hybrid CUPRA Leon for real-world day-to-day fuel consumption, although it will cost far more to tax. But CUPRA isn't offering a black pump fueled engine in our market, so your only other option at the foot of the CUPRA Leon range is the conventional 2-litre TSI 245 PS variant, which manages up to 39.2 miles per gallon and up to 162 grams per kilometre of CO2. Next up is the 2-litre TSI 300 variant. The readings there are 37.2 mpg and up to 171 grams per kilometre. Then the 2-litre TSI 310 4-drive estate, which manages up to 34.4 mpg and up to 186 grams per kilometre. The figures that I just quoted for the TSI 300 and TSI 310 variants see them BIK rated at 37%, a figure that requires you to pay a £1,910 first year rate for vehicle excise duty. For comparison, a CUPRA Leon e-hybrid would have a first year VED rate to pay of just £10. Whatever CUPRA variant you select, you can monitor its ongoing frugality via a selectable consumption readout on the left-hand side of the digital instrument binnacle screen. There's a sign-off screen, and that, when you power off, gives you the average consumption too. You get a slightly larger 55-litre fuel tank with the top 310 PS performance estate variant. It's 50 litres for the more conventional front-driven TSI 245 and TSI 300 models, and just 40 litres for this e-hybrid derivative. Prompts from the optional predictive adaptive cruise control system that most owners will specify are useful in saving fuel. This setup uses GPS data feeds delivered from the navigation system and inputs from both the car's standard dynamic road sign display system and the front-mounted camera to proactively amend your CUPRA Leon's cruise speed depending on the layout ahead, bends, roundabouts, junctions, changes in speed limits, etc. The DSG gearbox also incorporates a function which allows the engine to slumber briefly at cruising speeds too. And servicing? Well, as with Seat models, you're looking at a garage visit every 10,000 miles or every 12 months, whichever comes around first. At point of purchase, you can opt for a 2-year prepaid servicing plan with an affordable monthly payment scheme. What else? Well, in the current market, the 3-year 60,000 mile warranty cover isn't particularly generous. The paintwork warranty, that lasts for 3 years, and as you'd expect, you also get a 12-year anti-corrosion guarantee. The CUPRA Leon e-hybrid has a separate 8-year battery warranty, and that also covers the battery for up to 100,000 miles. What about residual values? Well, according to industry experts, a CUPRA Leon TSI 310 hatch VZ2 variant is expected to retain up to 41% of its P11D value after 3 years of use, a very decent return on an investment for a new brand entrant in the class. Insurance groupings for the mainstream CUPRA Leon model start at 28E for the base 245 TSI version. For the 2-litre TSI 300 PS derivative, it's Group 30E. The 2-litre TSI 310 PS 4-drive estate variant is rated at Group 33E. As for the e-hybrid models, well, this VZ2 variant gets Group 27E rating, and the VZ3 version is rated at Group 28E. There's never been a CUPRA badged Leon quite like this one. For some hot hatch customers, the idea of being able to combine storming performance with the all-electric drive capability of this e-hybrid variant will be novel. Others will want to stick instead with the familiar 2-litre petrol turbo formula of the more conventional derivatives. It's true that most of what's on offer here can also be had in differently packaged form, with sporty versions of the Golf, Skoda's Octavia or even Audi's A3, but the CUPRA Leon has a slightly more dynamic look and feel than any of those cars, closer to an old school hot hatch if you like, something that's particularly evident on the road in the conventional 300 PS model, which offers the everyday dynamic usability of a Focus ST with the sheer enjoyment of a Civic Type R. It's way better value than a sporty Golf, and arguably it shades all its rivals in terms of flamboyant cabin design, drive assistance features and standard equipment. Not everything's great, of course. The infotainment system is over-complex and often fiddly to use. The interior doesn't have the sheer quality you'd find in an Audi A3 or a sportier BMW 1 Series, and inevitably some of the agile sparkiness is diluted if you opt for this e-hybrid version. But none of this is really enough to significantly dull our basic approval of this car. If its engaging twist on the usual Volkswagen Group shopping rocket convection appeals, we think you'll bond quickly with this Iberian road burner.